Hi, I'm Christian.
And I'm Taylor,
and we are TK2LDCNEWS. Today we are here with Dr. Frank Smith, and we are going to ask him some questions about his life and many, many accomplishments. So, what made you want to be the founding executive director of the museum?
Well, my story goes back to when I was a young man, a college student in Atlanta at Morehouse College. I became a civil rights worker. I started working in the effort to try to get rid of Jim Crow laws that made black people go into one separate door and whites another, and black people drank colored water, white people drank white water. And most of all, African Americans couldn't even get any jobs in that system. So we started a sit-in movement there in Atlanta, a protest movement that eventually led me to Mississippi as a civil rights worker, as one of the full-time workers in Mississippi. I went there and I met a man who had his grandfather's rifle and his uniform, and he told me this story about blacks serving in the Civil War. It was news to me. I'd never heard this before. So as a young man, this is my first lesson I try to teach. As a young man at the age of about 21 or 22, I heard something that I got interested in. I started reading and thinking about it, and it stuck with me the rest of my life. So by the time I came here to Washington, D.C. many, many years later, I'm thinking about how to rebuild this neighborhood up here. I came up with this idea of building a monument. So if you're going to build a monument, now what are you going to build? Hey, man, I go back to these stories, to these soldiers again. I said, let's go down to the archives, get these things out of the archives, put them up on this wall, build a statue outside. And then we started working with all these descendants and these parents and these young children who are descendants from these soldiers. And it's just become a wonderful program that really has taken us in many directions. So something that I'm very proud to be associated with, and I'm glad to talk to you all about it.
Okay.
What do you think Dr. King would have done about Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and the Freddie Gray story?
Wow, that's a big question right there. Of course, you know, in Dr. King's day, he would have gone to visit the family. This is the way Dr. King operated. When he heard about the story about this tragic murder with Trayvon Martin, he would have gone to visit the family. He probably would have gone down to Florida and worked with the community, organized the community. He would have led some protests in that town. He would have led some boycotts in that town. And he would have worked to try to make it better, to make race relations better, and also to bring some justice to a young man who lost his life tragically there for no good reason at all, other than the fact that he was a young black boy walking in the neighborhood at night. And that's the only reason, really the only reason why he was killed. So I think we would have seen a very big protest movement if Dr. King were alive. Now, on the other hand, I'm very proud of the young people who are out there today protesting and trying to bring some justice here. It's the only way they're going to get any justice, and I'm glad they're taking the fight on.
Okay. So what is the best thing about having the African American Civil War Museum?
Well, every once in a while I get interviewed by two beautiful young ladies like you all that I never met before. I see you and your family, your mom and your dad and your little sister, and you're all thinking about this subject. I know we're in good hands because you'll keep this story alive for years and years and years to come. We built the monument for two purposes. One was to correct the great wrong in history, which pretty much left the story of these soldiers out of the history books. And the other reason for building it was to help with the revitalization of this community, which was in really bad shape when we first started working on this. So it had two purposes, and we think we've served both of those purposes well. People are talking about it now all over the place, and you saw a few weeks ago when we had the grand review parade where we celebrated the close of the Civil War. Thousands of people marched with us. Thousands of people watched this, 30,000 people. The police told me there were at least 30,000 spectators out there watching it. And then there is YouTube and Facebook and C-SPAN and all the various other news facilities that are pushing this around. Of course, your own television show, your own YouTube show that you're using. So you're helping to spread the story. So it has been a wonderful story, a wonderful time for me, and a wonderful time, I think, for the country. And I'm very glad to be here talking to you at a time when there's an African-American president of the United States. America's changed. We forced it to change. It had to change. It changed for the better. Dr. King said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And so we've seen some justice here, and I think it's made America a better place.
How do you feel about it?
How do I feel about?
How do you feel about the Trayvon Martin story and the Freddie Gray story?
Well, you know, when the Civil War is over, Congress passed 3 amendments. They passed the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery, the 14th Amendment, which makes African Americans citizens, and the 15th Amendment gives blacks the right to vote for the first time. Now, the 14th Amendment is a special piece of legislation because it says that, first of all, blacks are citizens, and then it says the states must provide what is called equal protection for people under the law. And what is happening with the Trayvon Martin case and these other cases is that they're not getting equal protection under the law. And really the only way they're ever going to get any justice in this system is if the federal government steps in under that 14th Amendment and takes over, because the state has already made up its mind that these lives don't matter. The prosecutors don't want to prosecute these guys. The city people don't want to charge them with any kind of crime. These people, the police officers who are shooting these people randomly, some of them in the back. So what I think about that is that the young people have got to keep this protest movement up. They've got to find a way to use all of the various techniques they have to organize all of these public relations facilities that we now have in our pockets with our cell phones and iPhones and all of the YouTube sites and things like that, to keep this pressure up until the federal government steps in and helps, because this is a national problem. We see now that this is a national problem, that this problem of discrimination, profiling, and violence against young African-American black men is a national problem. It's happening not just in the South, but in the North too, in Baltimore, Maryland, and then Indiana, and then other places in addition to the South. So it's something that really has to be taken on nationally, and I'm very glad to see that there are young people out there fighting about it right now. I'm glad to live long enough to see them fight about it. It's the only way it's going to change.
So what do you remember the most about Dr. Martin Luther King?
Well, what I remember most about Dr. King is that his life was his full, complete life was dedicated to the civil rights movement. He came into being, after finishing college and going directly to Alabama, after college and graduate school, going directly to Alabama, taking over a church there. Within a year of being in Montgomery, Alabama, he becomes the leader of the Montgomery Civil Rights Movement, and he meets Rosa Parks. And so he gets involved in that movement. That would chart his life until his death. And so he gave his full measure. And let me just say, Dr. King knew, because I know him and I met him personally. I saw him actually the day before he was killed. He knew that he was living his life in danger. As a matter of fact, the reason why he moved his family from Alabama to Atlanta, Georgia, was because he thought that he wanted to try to make it a little bit safer for them. His house had been bombed when he had a kid already, and the house bombed, wife and kids were in the house together at the time of the bombing. So he was trying to make it a little bit safer for his family, although he personally intended to keep this fight up for the rest of his life. So he's a good example of somebody who found a cause, who trained himself. He was an educated man. He had a PhD. He was dedicated. He was not somebody who would run away from a challenge. And ultimately, he gave his full measure, as President Lincoln would say, for his cause. Now, his full measure has meant a lot to black people in the United States. The average income for black communities has gone up tremendously in the last 40, 50 years. The number of blacks enrolled in college go from like 75,000 in 1950 to 2.5 million blacks enrolled in college. We earn a lot of money, much more than we ever earned before in our lives. And of course, there's an African-American president in the United States. So Dr. King's life meant something, not just to himself and to his family, but it meant something to this country. It helped bring about the change that makes America what it is.
You worked for the D.C. Council in the 1980s. Can you tell us what that was like?
Well, you're correct. I was born in Georgia. I spent 5 years in Mississippi in the civil rights movement. And then I decided when I was finished with my civil rights days to make a permanent home here in Washington, D.C. My wife at the time wanted to go to medical school here, so I came back and we started a life. And eventually, after some time here as a community organizer, I got elected first to the Board of Education and then to the D.C. City Council. And as a council member, it became my job to help with the revitalization of this neighborhood, which was really in a very bad shape. I mean, the houses were run down, the drug addicts were everywhere, the crime was all over the place, and you really couldn't live in some of these communities. It was really bad. And so it became my job as a councilman, because I stepped into that job. It became my responsibility to try to find ways to help fix this problem. And the African American Civil War Memorial became one of those things that we used, as I said before, to help fix this problem. And that is that once you build a monument and a museum in a neighborhood that has all the troubles I just talked about, if you want tourists to come to those neighborhoods, that's one of the reasons for building it here, is because you want tourists to come. You have to make the neighborhood safe and clean for tourists. if you make it safe and clean for tourists, you make it safe and clean for the neighbors also, for the people who live here. So as we clean up the neighborhood, we clean it up for everybody. And so it made it a better place. And so being a councilman enabled me to be able to do that. I had the tools and techniques and the friends and the support and enough you might say leadership among the council and the community to get it done. Excuse me.
So in the beginning of the interview, you said you went to Morehouse College. What made you want to go to Morehouse College?
Well, I grew up on a small town in Georgia, on a farm where I worked the fields and plowed the mules and did. And as a kid, you know, you dream about things in life. One of the things that you dream about, and I'm sure you all dreaming about these things too, you dream about one day when you're an adult, you want to be somebody. At the time, I wanted to be a lawyer. To be a lawyer, I had to go to college, I had to go to law school, I had to do various things in order to do that. I knew that from a young age. Now, at that age, at 16 or 17, when nobody in my family had ever gone to college, neither my mother nor my father had ever finished high school. So I knew that it was a big job, big stretch ahead of me, a long road, but I also knew it was possible. I believed it was possible for me to achieve my goals and to achieve my ambitions in life. But there was that matter of racial segregation and racial discrimination, which really kept black people out of jobs and so in order for me to achieve my personal goals in terms of my profession and what I wanted to be in life, career in life, I had to take some time out, join this group called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which is where I met Dr. Martin Luther King, and then try to change America, really, to change these employment practices and change these racial attitudes so that I could have a life of my own and my children could grow up with a life. And now I have grandchildren now, so my grandchildren will have a place to live and to work and be good citizens. So Morehouse College was the first step to that, and it'll be your first step too. When you finish high school, pick yourself a good college, go to school, do something worthwhile while you're there. You meet good friends, and those friends will probably be your friends for the rest of your life. And then together, you all will find good, always find good friends. Now, people who want to do something, don't be, if you're in a group and they want to do something wrong, leave that group and find yourself another group, find some other friends. Because they'll just pull you down. You'll never get anything done in life. And so the choices you make are important. The things you do are important. And picking a good college is important.
What did you do in life that you were most proud of?
Well, I'm a father and a grandfather. I have 9 grandchildren. They adore their granddaddy. I love them a lot. My youngest one looks like you, by the way. So I do a lot. I work a lot with them. I'm going to go this afternoon to see one of them play lacrosse. So I really enjoy working with them. They are good. And I guess, for older people, like I'm 72 years old, so when you get older, you start thinking, well, if somebody in the world is going to carry on some of these things that I've been working on, it's going to be one of these kids. If you can't expect some stranger to do it. If your own family doesn't do it, then who else is going to do it? So I'm very proud of my children and grandchildren who are still trying to make a life for themselves. Mm-hmm. Of course, what I will probably always be known most for is the African American Civil War Memorial. It is a national monument. It has 200,000 names on the walls outside. We have more names out there than any other monument in the world. We're going to be in the Guinness Book of Records because we have more names than any other monument in the world. So yes, it will probably be. I'll probably be known most for that, and that has far-reaching breadth and width because of those 200,000 names out there, 80% of the people live. So they have children and grandchildren living today who are trying to find their way here, so they can see their grandfather's name, great-great-grandfather's name on this wall outside. So it will probably be, I'll probably be better known for that. But at the end of the day, what makes me sleep good at night is I have wonderful grandchildren and children that I love very much, and we have a good time together.
So what do you recall the most about the boycotts in South?
Well, the boycotts had a very good and important purpose, and I think the young people who are demonstrating in the streets now should try to employ some of these tactics. With the boycott, what you do basically is you say, we are going to withdraw our spending money, our shopping power from the businesses downtown until the businesses get it, because in most cities, the power structure is controlled by the people who have money. Who are those people who have money? The people who have those large businesses downtown, the banks and the insurance companies and supermarkets and places. So, but they depend upon our money to stay in business. So what you do with a boycott is you try to get everybody involved. You say, look, this issue that we're trying to fight here is employment discrimination or racial discrimination, or in this case, of those young people who are being killed, police brutality. These issues are so, and they affect everybody, because when police officers get so far out of control, well, if they feel like it's okay to shoot you in the morning, they may shoot me in the afternoon. If they can shoot black kids without anybody saying anything, they'll shoot white kids too if you don't say somebody doesn't stop them. So they put all of us in danger, and so we may all have to come together to help stop this. And the important thing about a boycott is everybody can participate. If you're scared to march down the street because you're scared of tear gas, well, boycotting doesn't mean marching. It just means staying home. And if you're scared to be seen because you think your boss might see you and you might get fired, you can boycott without being seen. Get on the phone, call your friend. Now you can use text messages and emails and Instagram and all that stuff to tell people don't shop until we get this thing straightened out. We can do without all this stuff. Let's just wait till this thing gets better. And so it has a particular purpose that's very powerful, because it can touch the establishment in the pocket, which is what they love the most, right in their pocketbooks. And secondly, everybody can be involved if you do it right. And so they're very important, and it's a very important weapon. And one of the reasons why the people who are protesting that haven't gotten more traction and more influence out of what they're doing is because they haven't been able to employ these techniques along with their protests, their daily protests of lying in the streets and going to jail and stuff like that. You need more than that to engage the whole society in the effort to try to solve the problem.
What do we have to do to become a great leader like you?
Well, I'm not a great leader. I don't think anybody ever sets out to become a great leader. I don't think Martin Luther King set out to become a great leader. I think he set out to become a great minister because he had been called to that service. He was the third in a generation of preachers. His grandfather, father, and then himself were ministers, and one of his brothers was a minister, and one of his children, two of his children were ministers. So I think he was called to service because of the tradition in his family, and because he might say God called him to service. But I don't think he set out to become a great civil rights leader. He happened to be in Montgomery at the time that this movement started, and I've heard it said sort of jokingly that one of the reasons why they selected him was because he was the newest pastor in town. He didn't know how bad all these white people were in Montgomery because he hadn't been there long enough to learn all this yet. So they said, well, let's pick this guy. He's so naive. He doesn't really know how about it. He's not afraid of these people because he doesn't know anything about them. So he was sort of forced into glory, as Rome Bennett said about Abraham Lincoln. But I don't think he set out to be. Now, I think it is true, though, that at any moment along the way, he could have withdrawn because he knew what kind of danger he was in. And he knew, for example, when he marched into these towns, he knew he was going to jail. Sometimes we would take our toothbrush with us. We knew we were going to spend the weekend in jail. So he knew that, and he probably knew that his life was in danger. We've heard these speeches where he said, that he sounded like he knew that somebody was stalking him and that eventually he was going to be killed. So he probably knew that, and at some point or another he could have stopped and thought about it at one time, about going to New York, becoming the minister of a very large church there. So he could have stopped, but he didn't. And what propelled him to keep going, that is the great mystery of life. Would he have kept going if he hadn't been killed? At some point along the way, he probably would have gotten tired and gone into retirement or something. But I don't think people start out to be great leaders. I think you prepare yourself. This is what I would say to all young people. Prepare yourself. So if you are called upon to be a great leader, you are capable of doing it. Martin Luther King had a PhD. He had gone to a good college, Morehouse College. He'd gone to a good graduate school. He was very smart. He was well spoken. He was well learned. He came from a traditional minister. So he was qualified and prepared, which is one of the reasons why people chose him. And by the way, my own group, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which I was a part of, it's called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We were college students. And as college students like myself, we were most of the first generation of our families who'd gone to college. And most of us were tops in our high school classes. I graduated on top of my high school class. Most of us were good students who were smart. And why do I say that? Because the public will only follow you if they think you are smart enough and you're worthy of being followed. That's the only way you can get people to follow you. And So one of the lessons that I try to teach, and I think you should learn, is that you have to qualify yourself. Whatever you do, be good at it. You are wonderful interviewers. You're wonderful parents. Do that in life. Find yourself something that you can do really well, and do that in life, because that may be what it is that propels you into leadership in the country and in the world. And America and the world always look for good people, and there's always going to be plenty of room for leaders out there. So congratulations on a great start.
Okay, so our last question is: do you have any other any other goals in life you wish to achieve?
Do I have any other goals in life? Well, you know, I have the best job in the world. I'm the director of a museum that tells the story of an African American people who started out as slaves in America, and one of them ends up as president of the United States. So that's about as good as it gets. That's about as good as it gets. I'm 73 years old. One day I'd probably like to write a book where I can leave some of these ideas behind for other young people to talk about, and that's that's probably it. I think I'd like to write a book that would lay out some of my ideas so people can follow them, and it probably would be satirical as well as you can probably tell by the way I talk. I like you have to make some of this sound a little bit interesting and humorous, because life, it does have some humor in it. You know, God had a sense of humor, so it's important for us to have some humor in what we do. But I think it also will give me an opportunity to set out some of these ideas and goals that others who come after me might be able to use those. Because as one poet said, it gets rough and tough out here sometimes, and we all get tired and we get weary and we get depressed. And it's the words and the pictures and the books, stories of other people who have faced those toils and who have faced those tribulations, who have overcome those things, that encourage us to keep going. And so writing is important, reading is important, and studying is important. And so I want to write right there.
Yeah.
It occurred to me. This is the march. This is a photo from the March on Washington, and he's in there somewhere. I think that's him right there. That's Dr. Martin standing next to, I think it's Walter Reuther, right here. This is the guy from the NAACP. That's the Urban League. What's his name? President of the Urban League. And then this is Dr. King, right? That's him right there. This is the March on Washington. I was here. I came up to Washington for the March on Washington. 1963. I had been down there. I was in Mississippi for a year. I came in 1962. So we brought a lot of people here. This is the Selma to Montgomery March. This is the one that more people know about now, because every year they have somebody goes down there to march from Selma to Montgomery. They don't always march from Selma to Montgomery. They go across the bridge. And Dr. King actually did this march. This is the first day. He wasn't there for this day. The first day when all the people put the horses and stuff, tear gas on all the local people. He wasn't there for that day. He was there the second day. Actually, I had been there the week before with him at a meeting in Selma when actually they voted not to march. So I wasn't there for the march either, because I had gone back to Atlanta at the time. But I went over there a couple of days later on. The way this is supposed to work is that over here you see these protests. This is the Freedom Rides, the bus that's burning in Anniston, Alabama. The marches and protests and SNCC. I'll tell you about this. Is my group, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We were all college campus students, and all the people you see here were leaders on their own campuses. This chart was put together by the House Un-American Activities Committee, because they're investigating the civil rights movement as communists. And it's kind of interesting, because I saw a few days ago that the federal government is using these drones to make photographs of these protesters in these cities that are protesting. So they don't seem to be able to get over that part of it. They think everybody that does something, protesting and demonstrating is part of your rights in America, your civil rights. But they think every time somebody starts to do it, there's something un-American about it. So we've got a tough hill to fight to climb over this issue of police brutality, but we've got to keep at it until we get it straightened out. Actually, Maryland's emancipation. Maryland, I think in 1863, finally voted to free their slaves, and so this is what they call a broadside they put together, depicting all of the various aspects of slavery, and then finally getting their freedom.
Okay, so thank you you so much for your time in meeting us here at the African American Civil War Museum in DC. And have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful team.
Thank you.
All right.
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel
At TK2LDCNEWS. See you guys later.
Bye.
Okay.